Welcome back to the Anika Apple Podcast. This month, we're having a deeper conversation about identity, who we were told we are, who we became to survive, and who we are finally now becoming. Because here's what I know to be true. Healing restores your identity, and identity stabilizes your purpose. It is the foundation for your purpose. And purpose expresses who you were always meant to be. You were designed to be able to fulfill your purpose. So without the solid foundation of identity, it's difficult for you to fulfill that which you came to do. And let me tell you, there is no time that is more important for you to understand who you are and what you came here to do than right now. So across the next several episodes, we are going to be dedicating this conversation to helping you to reconnect with your God-given, your divine identity, and also to begin to understand how you can connect more deeply with the purpose for which you are here. I know that these conversations are going to be revealing for you, and in some case they may challenge you or push your buttons or, create some time that you need to step away and explore them on your own. And I encourage you to do exactly that. Oh, and by the way, if you are searching for what is the truth about your purpose, there is one great way to find that out, and that's through having a conversation with who you know as your creator. You see, purpose was designed for us before we ever took our first breath. And so was our identity. For those of you that may ground yourself in God's word, I would say to you, I knew you before you were formed in your mother's womb. Even before you became a life here on earth, before you took your first breath. You already had a God-given identity. And a lot of our work, our journey here in life, is returning to that identity. It's meaningful when you think about it. It's always helps to understand God's plan, right? When you look at it from, further down the road and you're looking backwards, because when you are looking forward, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you stand at the vantage point where you were reflecting back on what your journey has been, it's really easy to understand that you needed to have experiences throughout your life that were defining enough to help you decide to be who you were created to be. Let me say that again. The beauty of a relationship with God, with the divine, is that you have choice. And you go through these different experiences along your journey, leading you back home to who you truly are. And once you choose to be who you were designed to be, the levels of purpose that unfold for you help you to make the impact in the world that you were designed to deliver. So it stands to reason that when we are in a place where we're disconnected from our identity, we have a lot of work to do. Purpose feels hard. Departing from what you've known and what other behaviors look like can be really challenging. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I welcome you back. And for those of you who are joining the Anika Apple Podcast for the first time, I welcome you. I am a trusted advisor, spiritual strategist, and my work really is grounded in helping people here. God calls me their heart on earth. I am a prophet, and I deliver divine guidance every month to help you understand what is happening in the moment that we're in. And these conversations are really designed for us to step into the authentic leadership that God created within us. We do that by doing our work to heal, by standing boldly in our purpose and creating the change that we want to see in the world. This is about real transformation on purpose so that we can walk in our true divine purpose. So today's episode is all about identity formation. And I want to start off the conversation with sharing with you one of my favorite questions that I use in my coaching and advisory work. Who were you before the world told you? Now, I know it has been said many different ways, and hopefully you've heard it before, and it caused you to pause and really think for a moment about who you are, who you truly are. It's easy for us to see that we look to examples to help us identify ourselves, right? We're always looking for a connection. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, belonging is one of the foundational levels for us, right? And so after we satisfy the core things that we need, we're looking for connection. And part of that is being able to see and connect with how you see other people behave in a way that feels aligned with who you believe that you are. Now, a lot of times we are told what is appropriate and what is not. A lot of times we model behaviors where it looks like people are achieving or receiving the things that we desire. And that could be a whole host of things, right? And oftentimes the identity is shaped by behaviors that we don't want to fall into because of what we've been told about what happens when we do those things. Childhood is a really great example. You've just as many moments of being encouraged to do something that your parents or that the people who raised you are encouraging you to do as you do those moments of correction. Perhaps for some of you, you're like, there was more correction than there was encouragement, right? So one of the first places that we begin to shape identity is by listening to what the people raising us and are raised with us are doing and saying. Now, I'm a Gen Xer, and I would say that identity in my generation also is very much shaped by what we saw on TV, the stories that we heard about in the newspaper, even things that were on the radio, that we listened to the do nots as much as we did to the do's, and that our identity, instead of being the thing that we recognize is already inside of us, began being shaped by the things outside. So who shaped my identity? For example, I would tell you that some of the things for me were about the relationship that I had to my parents. My parents divorced when I was in elementary school age, and that shaped some of my identity, right? I think one of the things I would reflect on is that there are these moments of like, how do I behave perfectly well, right? So I don't create this dynamic where, the parent who's raising me doesn't like me anymore. How do I swallow the disappointment when I don't see the parent who's not living in the home with me? Because I want to make sure they come back and they spend time with me. I began to try to be, fun and good and all of that stuff. The people pleasing began in that time for me. I can also think about being an only child, right? And so some of the things that were formative for me there are like, you need to be responsible. Do what it is that you say you will do. And while those are good lessons, I'm not saying that all the things seeded in our identity in our youth were not good, but I want us to recognize where these stories came from and that not all of them are aligned with the truth of who God says you are. We have to recognize that the behavior patterns that we have often taken on as a way to get to or be in alignment with what we saw as an ideal identity for us may actually not be what we needed to do in order to have that outcome. Said another way, sometimes we might behave in a way that we think will give us an expected outcome when actually what it's doing is diminishing who we were called to be. If you imagine someone like an Angela Davis, and let's say that the stories that she told herself when she was a child is that she needed to silence her voice, she needed to be seen and not heard, she needed to be quiet, then what would have happened to the rebel that we needed to have the voice, the strength, the power, the authority? What would have happened if we didn't have that, right? And there's so many other examples I'm sure that you can think about in your life, people who represented something for you that you identified with, but you were afraid to behave in that way because of what you were told or what you felt like was going to be acceptable around you. Now let's move into the workforce, right? Corporate culture is strengthened by people who will follow the script. You want to grow? You're often told that you need to model what you see the other successful people doing in the business. Now, before the business leaders come after me, listen, I did it. I spent 30 years growing a career before I became an entrepreneur, and I was very successful at it. And you know what else I was really good at doing? Shape shifting. I was really good at navigating in those environments in a way that was in alignment with what other people expected of me. And that did not mean that I was always living up to exactly what God called me to do. I'm so grateful for the last few companies that I worked with and the roles that I had, because at that stage in my life, I was in more alignment with God than I had ever been. And this is not to say that I didn't know I heard God and all of that stuff. I certainly did, but I also tried to make what God was saying or telling me to do fit into a nice little neat script so I could continue being someone that people wanted in the room. What I found in one of my later roles is that when I came in the room and I shared what I knew to be true, and I led from the way that God was showing me that role and team needed to be led, the kind of impact I created had fruit to bear long after I transitioned out of that organization or that role. And the alignment and peace that I had in living those roles was so different than anything I'd ever experienced before. There have been moments throughout my career, right, where I saw myself truly living into the assignment. But to do it from a place grounded in the identity of who God says you are and the purpose for why you were there, that was transformational for me. And I saw countless other people leaning in to the truth of who they are and delivering the kind of results that the organization honored because they were authentically themselves, because they lived into their purpose, and because they owned their God-given identity. But let's be honest, every place doesn't have that level of comfort with people expressing themselves. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we willing to change and shift those cultures? Or is it time to find our success somewhere else? There's only so much time in your life where you can allow your voice to be silenced, where you can minimize the voice that you hear from God, for those of you who hear God in that way, where you can find yourself in calm when you know you are called to something else. And a lot of times we recognize purpose, right? For many years, even before I transitioned into my own business, I supported people with purpose work. People would come to me and say, hey, Anika, I'm thinking about transitioning out of this role or I'm moving to another job. What should I do? And literally they could sit across from me and God would begin to download to me, this person's really good at this. They should look at this. Ask them questions about these things. And I would just do that. And ultimately, in every conversation, and when I say every, there would be so much recognition from the person about like, oh my gosh, I do love to do that. Yes, I could see how that skill works with that. Oh my gosh, I never thought about that being transferable to wanting to do this over here. Yes, I can see how that set of experiences would make me even more qualified for the thing that I really desire to do. And it happened over and over and over again because God was helping me to understand purpose. So I've known for a very long time that that is a part of my gifting. I see people, and if they are open and interested in knowing, God shows me who they are. What I have more recently begun to understand in my work as an entrepreneur is that it's identity too that God is showing me about who they are. And in order for me to be able to be effective at helping people know their identity, I had to go on my own journey. And let me tell you something, that journey was not easy. And that's why I want to spend some of this time with you as we talk about identity, because healing is connected to that work. So if we back all the way up to where I started the episode, right? I talked a little bit about people pleasing. For me, that was one of the roles that I took on early on. And the people-pleasing aspect of my journey helped me to be able to be in the room, to be somebody that people counted on, like all of those things. It fulfilled something for me. What I recognized during my healing journey is how much of the rest of me I was leaving outside of the room because I was worried and more concerned about whether or not I was going to be in alignment with what people expected of me. And if you can imagine, as someone who is God's prophet, that's a really hard place to be. I always think about Jonah in this example because, Jonah, the story of Jonah, right? He is called. He is known to be a great prophet, right? And he is called to go to Nineveh, and he does not want to go because they're a hot mess over there, right? And so whatever feelings he was having about going over there, he didn't necessarily feel like the people deserved to be saved. Like, there were all of these reasons why he didn't want to go do this assignment. And yet, because he was who God had called for this, it was important for him to show up, so much so that he ended up spending time in the belly of the whale, trying to avoid the assignment until he surrendered, and then God sent him on. Now, we don't want to be in the belly of the whale, right? But think for a moment about what he learned about himself after he went. When he saw the transformation and change that happened there, when he saw the responsiveness, he assumed that things were going to work another way, and did not hold on to the truth, which is that we all came here with a purpose, to serve something very specific that is in alignment with God's desire, not just for us, but for the world. So if you think about it, you are very much like that. Your identity is how you ground your purpose, and your purpose is the way that you show up to deliver what God has placed on the inside of you to the world. You cannot do that if you're not willing to understand who you are. The who you are is identity. And that challenge of understanding what your identity is can be really complex. One of my Jonah stories is about going to a place that was really very comfortable for me. I finally felt like this is belonging. And then God challenged me. And I began to see things that I could not unsee. I could no longer align myself to the behaviors and things that I saw in people around me, to the acceptance of situations that I saw. And through that conviction, you have to imagine this was really tough for someone who grew up as a people pleaser, who created this people pleasing. I was so good at it that if you asked me, I would have said, oh, I do this like truly because I love people, which is partially true. I do deeply love people. But it was also a survival mechanism that I couldn't even recognize as different from who I am. I now know that to be very different than my truth. And it is not that I don't desire people to have what they want and to live great lives and all of those things. I do. But more than that, I desire that they do it based on knowing the truth. And I desire that I hold myself in a place where I have reverence for my own boundaries, that I honor who God has created me to be, and I don't shrink my voice to make it comfortable for other people. That has been work. So think about this for a moment, right? Sometimes our identity comes in direct conflict with what we've created for ourselves, the persona. So if I go back to my earlier example of being, in Gen X, right? Where a lot of TV helped us to shape who we are and all of that. It was culture that created a lot of our foundation. So if I think about what it looked like for belonging for me as a child, I grew up where I was absolutely the minority. I was the only Black girl, often only Black person in my class throughout most of my schooling until middle school and high school. And so there was already something that felt different. And then you go into music and the shows that you like and all of that stuff, and everybody's talking about whatever is popular at the time, and you don't watch that, or you don't listen to that, or it's not what your family talks about. It's not the kind of thing you have for dinner. It's not the places that you go. And so after spending so much time feeling like you're isolated, you start to look for ways to connect with people. And then that becomes morphing these parts of yourself. And I can remember, and I think this is so funny, in this moment, I can remember having someone who's a really good family friend who was like, I need to get you around some Black people. And like, you need the experience of being around people who look like you. And I really was like, what would it change? Like, I love my friends. I love the people I live around, whatever. Like, I'm comfortable in this space. But I didn't understand until I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to be around people who have some of these similar experiences. And I didn't know that I could choose to be different, if that makes sense. You can choose to be different, even at this age, in this moment, and wherever you work and whatever you do for a living and whatever it is that God has brought you here to do. You can choose to be different. In fact, we need you to step into your identity, because when you look at the things outside of you, the things happening in the world, they are happening right now because we are having an identity crisis. Individually and collectively, as communities, we have identity crisis. We have literally forgotten who God has created us to be. We don't remember that we are descendants of kings and queens. We don't remember that in the past, the same people who bore the same blood as us figured out ways to move themselves out of all of the situations that they were in and overturn the way that they were treated and how the things were established on their backs in this very country. We can see cycles of things repeating themselves, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. We can see the cycles, but this time is different. If you are in the U.S., tap all the way in. Sit with God after this episode so you can understand it even more deeply. We've got to know who we are. Because when you are sitting in your God-given identity, it doesn't matter what somebody else tells you about what you're doing, why you're doing it, or any of that stuff. You go back and have that conversation with God, you know that you know that you know who you are. And when you ground yourself in your God-given identity, then all of the things that you believe about who you are, those things are solid. You can't tell me that God does not have and keep the promises that they do for the people who are in alignment with their identity. I know why God sent me. I am very clear. I understand the impact I am to make in the world, and God consistently shows me what is happening, because that's a part of my identity. And so then my purpose work is to create safe spaces for people to understand and know what it is that God is saying, to understand who they are so that they can show up in a way that creates the kind of change they were specifically designed to make. That when I understand my identity, I know why there are certain things that are just simply not for me, places where I just will not go, things that I will not partake in, things that I just will not do. Like, you just know, you understand it. And that alignment creates a different experience in your body. Because even though you may not be cognizant, it may not be sitting in your consciousness about who you are, the rest of you knows. That's how you can feel the difference when something feels aligned to you and when it doesn't. Some of you might identify with this feeling of like, something about that story feels off, but I can't actually put my finger on it. That's your intuitiveness, right? Some people would say that's your discernment. Either way, that thing is operating all the time. We have just learned to trust the thinking mind more so than we do what was placed on the inside of us. And that is a fallacy. Because this thing has been trained by what's happening around us. There's a whole chapter in my book, Healing is Required, about the matrix. And I am telling you, that is absolutely where you will find so much revelation, so many moments where you're like, aha, this is why I feel that way, or how I saw this thing, or why I didn't understand how I felt this way. The way that we are connected in our minds to what is taught to us, what is shown to us, and to the identities that are considered acceptable is literally equivalent to brainwashing. Period. Full stop. Feel how you want to feel about it, but when you come here, I'm going to tell you the truth. That said, getting back to your true identity is your way to pull yourself out of operating in a way that is just to be aligned with the world. So in my next episode, I will share with you a bit about how God took me on the journey to understand and explore my identity. But there's some things I want to leave you with as we close this week's episode. First of all, I would say to you that performance becomes a survival mechanism for us. Performing versus truly being who we are called to be. And we have the opportunity here to recognize that this performance, that is a survival mechanism for us, was keeping us safe. So, one of my teachings is that we don't lament those things that we did or that we chose when we didn't know what we know today, right? We appreciate it because it gave us lessons. It gives us the contrast with which we need to see that there is a better, different choice that we can make in this moment. And this time is all about us now saying, now that I've experienced what I have and I know what I know, what do I want? Well, I don't want to live in survival mode. And not living in survival mode changes the very experience you have with your nervous system. That's different. Not living in a state of constant stress. There is freedom on the other side of you choosing to operate in your identity as who you are created to be. That alignment is so deeply incredible. It is so amazing. It's like finding the best fitting pair of shoes that you have ever had. Like as a woman, I could say, like finding that high heel that you can be in all day, all night, or whatever. And, take it from what you're doing in the morning to being out on the dance floor. Like, you just can keep going because it's you. And don't you want that? You deserve to have that, to live a life where you get to be all of who you are. We recognize that we had to survive in the past until we got to this point. Whenever it is that you are really ready to say yes to understanding and to walking in your identity. Because let me be clear, you can sit down right now with whomever it is that God leads you to that helps you to understand your identity. Perhaps you hear it for yourself. Maybe you have some people who are in your circle that are confirming it for you. Maybe you utilize people who are gifted as I am to help you understand your identity. But you can hear it and still choose to not own it. You can choose that you're not ready yet. I know for me, God revealed my identity to me and I was like, okay, that sounds cool. I have no idea what you expect of me related to that. What exactly does that mean? And there were moments where I was learning and growing and really testing between standing in the fullness of this identity and operating in the way I did before. And I remember one time in particular where there was a situation I said to God, like, why don't you just tell them who I am? Like, I don't understand. Tell them you sent me and here's what you sent me to do. Wouldn't that just be simpler? And God's response to me was, what good would it be to tell them who you are if you are not committed to walk in it? I can tell them, but why would they believe it if you're not owning it? So there's a journey to accepting it, and we will talk about that in the upcoming episodes. I'm chomping at the bit to get into that and share that with you. But for today, I just want you to sit in this. I want you to allow yourself to explore the question, who were you before the world told you? Before you started to see and identify with things outside of yourself? When was the last time you went within yourself to say, this is actually really who I am? Or this feels so aligned for me. I want more of this. What does this mean about my identity? What's the last time you allowed yourself to just be still and listen? To hear what the divine, what source, God says about who you are and believe them. Because sometimes it's hard for us to believe what God says. In my own journey, God revealed who I was to me, and I sat with that, and I shared it with no one. And at some point, God took a trusted, very trusted friend who was new to me at the time, relatively new, and told her who I was. And one day we were in prayer together, and she said to me, this is what God has been saying to me about you. And I was just still. Because someone else confirming that for me, what God had already said to me, made it real. And now I had to do something about it. I didn't make a decision, right? And as I said earlier, the decision could be like, yeah, I heard you, but I'm not walking in that because that feels hefty. Or like, okay, God, I'm willing to explore it. So that's one. Two, I encourage you to go back and think about what you loved to do. Who did you love to be around when you were a child? Try and travel back to those early memories. What brought you joy? Envision yourself back in that stage, in that age. What felt aligned to you? These are some of the clues that can help you connect to identity. And if nothing else, allowing yourself to feel that experience again will make you want to sit with God to say, show me more. Because when we feel that experience of being in deep, true alignment, we want more of it. There is nothing like it. Because that indeed is freedom. The third thing I want to offer to you is I want to ask you this question about performing. So if you're someone who recognizes that there are places where you've been performing in your life, ask what it protected. What did that performance protect? Because you didn't do it just for the sake of. There's something that you thought would happen, something that you wanted to avoid, something that you wanted to achieve, that it felt like you would be able to obtain it when you were performing. So what would it look like to create a real path to whatever that is, or away from whatever that is, by being who you truly are? What I know for certain is that once you do the work to understand your identity and you say yes, that path becomes really easeful. It's nothing like trying to get there from a place where you are not standing fully in the truth of who you are. And then with all of that, I would offer you that grounding yourself in your truth, like understanding what you are here to do, your purpose, is a way for you to continue to find the value in continuing to understand your identity. Because if your purpose is something that is very compelling to you, if you get excited about whatever it is that you know you're called to do in this lifetime, and you want to do more of it, it can be that compelling future for you that encourages you to stand boldly in your identity. That work is available to you right now today. So take those steps. Allow that to be your journaling prompts for the next couple of days, right? And sit with the truth that comes up for you. And for those of you who are like, like, I need this now. I want to understand with clarity and certainty who it is that God says I am and what I am here to do. And you are wrestling with figuring that out by yourself. I have something for you. It's called Crowned. Crowned is an offering where I sit with you in a divine guidance session, allowing God to speak through me to help clarify the truth of who you are. What is your identity? What were you created and sent here to do? What is your assignment? In my Crown sessions, I spend time in advance of meeting with the client to bring insights in that God gives me in advance, and then to sit with the client and allow God to flow through so that you get the clarity that you need. There is nothing like being able to walk away knowing what it is that God is saying. If you followed me for a while, you probably heard me share the stories that I would say to God, I love you, I hear you, but can you send it through a person? And you probably find that funny because I shared with you that I am a prophet, but it's the truth. It's so easy to hear for other people, and it can be very complicated to trust what you hear for yourself. And so sometimes I would want the benefit of sitting with someone else to hear them confirm without my sharing what it is that God was saying. I have been doing these sessions formally and informally for years now. And what I find is that they're some of my favorite work to do with clients because there's nothing like seeing someone light up. When that thing touches the place, it's like lighting a candle on the inside of their belly that now sets their whole soul on fire. So for me, it is divine work that I love to do. But once that flame starts to burn, I get to watch that person take off in ways that only we could have imagined together. God is incredible in what they have designed within each of us. And it is available to you. The life of your dreams, living in alignment, freedom, and the confidence of knowing what you know about who you are and what you came here to do, which we can all use a lot more of in this moment. Before I close, I want to encourage you to recognize that we are in a really critical time. It's not just because it's being said on the media or any of those things, but there's a lot shifting right now, and I am talking to you from a spiritual place. And understanding who you are is going to be part of what separates you from what is happening to people who are just choosing opposite in the world. Your identity helps you to have clarity in times of uncertainty. Your identity reminds you that you are covered and taken care of, supported when we are going through the kind of turbulent times that we're in right now. And we need people who understand who they are and are clear about their purpose to be able to step forward and to do what they're called to do. And before you think, oh my gosh, does that mean, I'm on the front lines and all that stuff? It is unique to who you are. So the beautiful thing about it is long before you were ever born, God knew exactly the role that you were meant to play in this time. And that thing, whatever it is, it's something you have the capacity to do. Think about the story of Jonah. He had his resistance, but he was the one who needed to go. How many times have we thought when someone encourages us to go do something, or they're like, they voluntold you that it's your job to go do it. How many times have you been in that moment like, but why me? Because you're the person that has that exact thing that those people are going to need in order to say yes. You're the person who can tell the story in a compelling way. You're the person who can paint the vision and help people understand the purpose. You're the person that can rally the troops behind them and start a movement. You're the person. You're the one that God desired to do whatever it is. And so even if you have fear or discomfort like Jonah did and like I shared in my story, it doesn't mean that you are not the precise person. And when God gives you that identity and that assignment, you are equipped for that thing. For some of you right now, you're like, yeah, if I think back about my life experiences, all of the things that I did before led me to be prepared for this. Exactly. My work across 30 years of working in businesses, corporate America, absolutely equipped me to do exactly what I'm doing today. And the work it's not the same, right? So I would tell you, you've been in training for this moment. You've been working to be at a place where you can say yes to your true divine identity, and where you can say yes to operating in your purpose. And that work is something that continues certainly across our lifetime, but you need to understand it now. And for those of you leaning in like, yes, how do I work with you? There's a link in the show notes that shares with you Crowned, the offering that I mentioned earlier, as well as a link to my website to explore the other work I do. And before I go, if you have been intrigued by this conversation today, I will tell you it is time for you to pick up your copy of Healing is Required. You can buy it at my website at anikaapple.com or at the book's website at healingisrequired.com. Or of course, you can grab it on Amazon or your favorite bookstore. But this book, Healing is Required, is truly a divine guide map for us to understand the importance of healing, why we need it now, how we're all connected, and what to do to start your healing journey. So some of the work that we'll talk about in the upcoming episodes is how you begin to do your healing work so that you can accept and receive this identity. Now that you've heard what God says about you and you understand what your purpose is at this level, what do you have to heal and move out of the way in order to be able to walk in it and own it? And that's the work we're going to talk about. And that is also here in the book. So thank you for joining me today for the Anika Apple Podcast. I look forward to connecting with you again next week. And please, before you go, let me know how the episode landed for you. What was a key aha moment? Are you going to take those questions and add them into your journal prompts for the week? And don't forget to share the episode with someone who you know is in a moment where they're experiencing the kind of transition that we've talked about today, and would benefit from knowing that they're not alone. We're going to do this healing work together, and we are going to heal the world. Peace and blessings.